Welcome to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave.
And I'm Amber Duke. It seems Dems are in disarray once again. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is receiving fierce backlash after siding with the Republican CR bill to keep the government open. Even Democrat stalwarts like MSNBC anchor Simone Sanders are threatening to leave the party entirely. Let's watch.
There's actually little that the Senate minority leader can say, and the 10 Democrats that voted with the Republicans can say, to appease somebody like me. I'm about to change my registration to independent, first and foremost. Shout out to Hakeem Jeffries, though, because the congressional Democrats stayed together. And I'm just going to, I don't have a question, I'm just going to read what Rebecca Traister had to say. This is what Rebecca Traister said. Let's get Rebecca Traister up there on the thing. Rebecca Traister, she writes this, and she, on her Substack, she says, in 2024, Democrats ran on warnings that Trump was going to destroy our democracy, and now that he and his team are very much in the process of doing just that, these same politicians are questioning whether or not to stand up to him and his party at one of the first opportunities they have to meaningfully do so. The only opportunity, I would add, there's not another option for Senate or Democratic or Senate Democrats or House Democrats to effectively push back. This was it.
Good old Chuck is insisting that a government shutdown would have been worse for the American public. Let's hear his defense.
The executive branch, in this case, Musk, Doge, and this horrible guy Vogt, who have no concern for working people, would have had sole power to determine what opens and what closes. They determine what is essential. You can't go to court. So on day 2, get rid of SNAP and food for hungry kids. It's not essential. Day 4, get rid of mass transit aid. Let New York City do it. Not essential. Cut back on Medicaid and health care. Within 2 weeks, everyone would have been howling. Furthermore, it's even worse. It has no off-ramp. Guess who determines when we leave the shutdown? The Republicans. And let's not forget how bad they are. This guy Vogt, probably the most evil man. He's the guy who came up with that Project 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, he has a whole playbook of what to shut down. So they had said, one of the Republican senators who knows said to us, you'll be in the shutdown for 6 to 9 months till we totally destroy the federal government.
So I actually think Chuck Schumer has a point, what he's saying that now, I'm fine with all those things coming to pass because like Elon Musk and I guess Donald Trump, I want to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. He is right that if Democrats allowed the government to shut down, it is on some level giving Republicans kind of what they want or some control over it, although we should always be careful to note that an unplanned total shutdown of the federal government is not very efficient as far as I'm aware. For instance, the federal employees who end up effectively furloughed during that, well, when the government funding is restored, they all end up getting back pay anyway, so it does not save money. And in fact, the act of shutting it down is itself kind of inefficient. So this is not the way we want things done. But it is kind of what Elon is trying to do. So it would be giving them what they want. But initially, Chuck Schumer said he was perfectly happy to let them do that. So I think it's his own flip-flopping that just betrays a total lack of a coherent strategy on their part, which is why no one on the Democratic side seems to, including both the liberal activists who want to, scream into the night or into a pillow or whatever, and also more moderate people who maybe want to get along with Republicans on some level. None of them have faith in Chuck Schumer because he hasn't picked a strategy.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I sort of land more on Chuck Schumer's side here because it's almost inevitable that given the current political makeup of Congress, that a shutdown would be blamed almost entirely on Democrats.
Yeah.
And what exactly would they plan on getting out of that in terms of leverage? The idea that you're somehow going to get a better bill when what's up on the table right now is primarily just a continuation of 2024 funding.
That's the problem I have with it.
Right. Outside of some minor domestic cuts, certainly not to the programs that AOC is screaming about, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, et cetera. None of those are getting touched by this bill. Instead, you have, again, mostly retained 2024 funding levels with some more money for border security and then some increased money for Department of Defense spending. So this is not like the radical conservative bill.
I like the idea that there's this guy with his finger on the food snaps button. And the second, food stamps rather, the second snap, the second you have legal permission or jurisdiction to do it. You press that button over and over to take those away.
OMB director Russ Vaught, who was the mastermind
Project
behind
2025.
He was like one of the hundreds of advisors on it or something.
And again, Project 2025 is just standard conservative policy, some of which I agree with and some of which I don't, but it is just literally the Republican agenda. It is no different from the Republican agenda going back for the last 40 years.
The fear-mongering on that was incredible.
That was pretty funny.
I'm so glad that, I guess we're not over it, but
yeah.
But so you have this pretty anodyne CR. Let's say you go through with the shutdown and Democrats decide to cry and scream and not invoke the filibuster and all that. What do you think you're going to get out of the other side of this? Do you think the Republicans are going to be more amenable to working with Democrats and actually give them something more moderate? Like, that seems very unlikely to me, because this bill in and of itself was already a compromise between the Freedom Caucus and the more moderate Republicans. Yeah. It's probably the best that Democrats are going to get. So it
continues Biden spending.
Right.
So that's the problem I have with it. Right. That's what Thomas Massie and Rand Paul were complaining about.
And we talked about this on the show last week about how this would have been the time to actually start instituting some of those programs identified by DOJ for cuts, and
they're not doing it.
They're not doing it, and so to hear Democrats whine and complain about it is so funny to me, because nobody's thrilled about this bill. Nobody's happy with it. Yeah. But to shut down the government and think you're going to get something better just seems inane to me.
Yeah, but that does work both ways, because to Thomas Massie's point, it's not like 6 months from now Republicans are going to necessarily be in a stronger bargaining position. In fact, the reverse is likely to be the case. And so I really hope, despite them having passed this obscene continuation of the Biden spending levels, well, then now is the time to at the very least do what Rand Paul has suggested, the rescissions, which do not take the vote of the full Senate. You can do that on a simple majority vote, which we have, which the limiting government faction has. There is no reason not to do that. It is self-sabotage. There's just no reason not to do it. Please do it. Please make it happen. Unless you so fear that cutting government in any fundamental way, the backlash from that will be so bad, then what are you even doing? Then what is the point of taking power? It's just to hold it and hoard it for as long as you can. This is why people don't like politicians.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Republicans are great at being the minority party, but whenever they get a hint of power, they all run scared. They tuck their tails. They love to whine.
Well, the deep state stopped us from doing it. It's so sad.
But the mainstream media was mean to us when we did it. When we did what the voters told us to do. They kept writing hit pieces about us.
I know.
It's so annoying.
I know. That's my fear. My own conspiracy theory is that they do things in a way they know can be easily subjected to court orders halting them or whatever it is, because then they can continue the whining and not actually do it. Yeah. And that could be the case for some of these, for some of the DOJ style cuts and layoffs that are happening, as they could get reinstated by court. But they don't have to. It doesn't have to be that way if you do rescission.
They just don't want any responsibility for anything that happens.
Yeah.
Good or bad. They don't want any responsibility. They want to do nothing so that they can just continue to get reelected, and they can tell people it wasn't their fault, it was the Democrats' fault, it was Trump's fault, blah, 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 blah. It's always somebody else's fault. Congress is just obsessed with inaction.
Meanwhile, Democratic leadership is just like, well, yeah, everything's our fault, but who cares? We're just going to continue to be the Democratic leadership. You can't stop us.
Exactly.
We're not ever going to retire or get out of the way. It's inconceivable to them that they would even do that.
Rescissions is such a great idea, though. It's so obvious. They actually tried to do this at the end of Trump's first term, specifically on foreign funding. Trump had identified hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign aid programs that he wanted to cut through rescissions. And if I remember correctly, it was the same scenario where the Republicans were too weak-kneed to actually follow through. So even though he had handed them on a silver platter this easily digestible, easily defensible plan for cutting foreign spending,
Amber, we just need to win one more election.
Just one more.
And then
we just got to get through the midterms.
That will be the time.
And then they're going to lose the House in the midterms, and then they're going to be able to.
And then we need to win the election after that. And then once we win, we'll need to win the next one.
And then we'll do it.
Yeah.
But only if we can win the next one after that.
I want to get on a rocket and go to space with Elon.
Go colonize Mars.
Time to go colonize Mars. Well, you'll love this. Marianne Williamson, who co-hosted Rising with me today, we discussed the space stuff, and she was afraid of exporting the human imperialist colonialist project to another planet. So we had an interesting discussion about that.
Are there Native Americans?
That's what I said. Well, there's no one on Mars. It's okay to take it, but there's nobody else on it.
But the indigenous organisms, Robby.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool if there are some?
Life on Mars.
That's gonna be us someday. All right, thanks for watching Free Media. We went off on a real random tangent there. Stick around because we have more right after this.